start off with our Hayom Yom today. So we in the 27th of Tishrei, and the Hayom Yom for today is Torah and Mitzvot encompass man from the instant of emergence from his mother's womb until his final time comes. They place him in a light-filled situation with healthy intelligence and acquisition of excellent moral virtues and upright conduct, not only in relation to Hashem, but also in relation to his fellow man. For whoever is guided by Torah and the instructions of our sages has a life of good fortune, materially and in spirit. So that sounds very nice. It also sounds very optimistic. I want to come back to this and talk about it almost as it would be a summary of the whole of everything else that I plan to teach tonight, because that kind of puts it into a nutshell. What I wanted to talk about was the aspects of creation, given that we're starting Torah again, and it starts with Bereishit bara Elokim, that in the beginning Hashem creates es hashamayim ve'es haaretz, the heavens and the earth. And there's so much to say. I was looking at the homage, and just reading the introduction to the homage really was an incredible education for me. I felt like I was learning things that I really haven't learned before, or got a lot more clarity on things that perhaps I've learned before. So that's where we're going to start. So the Sefer Bereishit is also called the Book of the Upright. Why? Because we start off with our imahot, our mothers and our fathers, and they are, so to speak, role models for us, not role models in the Christian sense, because the Christian role models, the saints, they are sort of perfect. Jewish role models in the Torah, we see them struggling, we see them having tests, we see them experiencing a whole multitude of human emotions, and we also see them striving to emerge as people. Well, let me not give it away. So before I talk about the imahos and the avos, so it's called the Book of the Upright, and it's we're focusing on creation. And what is the purpose of creation, really? If we think about Bereishit bara Elokim, we have to think, what is the whole point of the creation of the whole universe? And the point of creation of the whole universe is really that the lower realms become receptive to divine consciousness. That's the point of all of creation. And if you think about it in the context of where we are now, which is this incredibly exciting moment, which I would say we already, if you've been pregnant, if you've given birth, or if you've been with someone who's been pregnant or given birth, or my most recent memories with one of my daughter's children, she was pregnant, and then she thought she was going to be early, and she was kind of almost in labor, and almost in labor, and almost in labor for quite a few weeks. She was almost in labor, and everything was on hold because we thought she's going into labor any minute. She thought she was going to be early. And then she did, in fact, go into labor. So, and as you all know, those of you who've been blessed to have children, so labor can be very quick, or it can be kind of a lengthy process. But I certainly think that we are either in the period of Braxton Hicks, or the pre-labor, or we ride in the midst of contractions, bringing about a very different consciousness onto the face of the earth right now. And if we think about it, we're trying to birth a new reality, and the reality that we're trying to birth is very consistent with the reality that was present from the beginning of creation, which is that the lower realms should become a receptacle to divine consciousness. And that's really what we're trying to do now. We're trying to raise up the level of the lower realms so that we can become available and have the vessels to receive a new reality, a new download, a new way of being. So from the first moment of creation, this was Hashem's intention, that the lower realms would be a receptacle for divine consciousness. So, and how would that come into being? That the Torah would be the tool. The Torah would be the tool that everyone here on earth would be able to become more spiritually sensitive, tune into their neshamas, to their soul, and have a relationship with their higher selves and with Hashem. So the Torah is the tool. In order for this drama to take place, three things would be needed: the world, which would be the setting for this drama; the human race, which would be the actors of this drama; and the Torah is really providing a script for this drama. So the Torah really precedes anything. The Torah is the blueprint, and the Torah exists prior to creation. So it can never be there can never be an obstacle to the Torah's fulfillment. In other words, if the Torah is the first a priori element of this three-part thing, the world, the people, the Torah, nothing in the world can be an obstacle to fulfilling the Torah, because the world was created for the sake of the Torah, so to speak. So Hashem wanted free choice. So Hashem wants free choice, so he hides himself in the world so that people can have free choice. And part of that free choice would be to ignore Hashem and to deny his existence and to push him out of the center stage of what's going on. So the first part of the Torah describes, first we have the Imahot, and well, we don't actually have the Imahot right away. We have Adam, and then we have Noach, and we know that there's many generations. I think there's 10 generations from Adam to Noach, and then 10 generations from Noach to Abraham, and then a number of generations until we get to Torah and the receiving of the Torah. But from all those generations until we get to Avram Avinu, we have people not conscious of Hashem, not acknowledging Hashem, consciously trying to distance themselves from Hashem. And then we start seeing the emergence of this nation founded by Abraham and then his son Yitzhak. And so the development of this special family that is connected to the mission starts developing and evolving. So we have this family, this tribe that in a way are willing or connected or plugged into this vision that Hashem has always had, that the lower realm should become a receptacle to higher consciousness. And the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach are given to everybody else really to keep law and order and to keep justice. But this aspect of infusing the world with divine consciousness transforming the world with divine consciousness, and really elevating the world with divine consciousness is a task that was given to whoever would have been available to it. Initially, Hashem maybe intended the entire human nation, human family, the entire world to be participants in that, but it so happened that there were so many nations not available, not interested, not willing, that Hashem then picks Abraham, and then Abraham's trying with Sarah to have a child. He has, we know the whole story, he has Ishmael, and then he has Yitzchak, and then Yitzchak has his two sons, he has Esav and Yaakov, and then Esav has to be kind of, you know, weeded, I don't like to use that word, but separated out. And then we have Yaakov, and we have his 12 sons, and that's when we get the beginning of this tribe that can implement this vision and this intention. So, when we, and if we talk about the fact that there's an upper realm and a lower realm, so what is inherent in the lower realm is that it's always going to have the aspect of divine light concealed. The materialistic realm is always going to be concealing that divine light, and that divine light is always going to have to be revealed. So once again, we have a link up with our teaching from Likutei Halachot, which talks about how creation of the world imitates the aspect of bringing korbanot in the Beis HaMikdash. Because we brought korbanot in the Beis HaMikdash, we are extracting the divine holy aspect out of the animal, and the physicality of the animal sort of gets separated. We talked about it as a birur, a separation. And then we explained how during the time that the Jewish people would be offering korbanot in the temple, there would be groups. The Kohanim would be doing the service, the Leviim would be singing, and then the Yisraelim working in shifts, which we called ma'alot, I think. Ma'alot, I think that was the word. They would be working in shifts, and they would be reciting passages of Torah. And we said, which Torah would they be reciting? And we said, passages from the creation of the world, from Parshas Bereishit. Because the same way Hashem had to, so to speak, separate the good, the light from the dark, and assert that light over the dark, that is present right in the moment of creation. And that's present every single day. And that's our task every single day, to constantly assert the light or the good or the divine consciousness over the material, the dark, the constricted, to constantly work that effort of expansion, revelation, divinity, light against the gravity of concealment, darkness, materiality. So we can talk about that in a little bit. So the materialistic world is sort of egocentric in its design, and it will conceal reality. And in a way, there's an interesting play on the word Bereishit, because bari means healthy. And so creation is an aspect of allowing health to permeate, spiritual health to permeate into the world. Hi, Shoshana. Shoshana's just arrived. Nice to have you there. So, Bereishit, the beginnings of our divine mission is to heal heaven and earth. So, relating the word Bereishit to the word bari, which means healthy, the creation is in a way an act almost of healing, which is kind of interesting. So for me to explain that again, I will actually read from the first verse of the homage, which is very interesting. It says, Bereishit, in the beginning, bara, created, Elokim, es hashamayim ve'es haaretz. V'haaretz hayita, or hayisa, and the land was tohu uvohu. It was tohu and vohu. It was unorganized. It was sort of chaotic. V'choshech, and there was darkness, al pnei tahom. There was this darkness on this mysterious depths. And then it says, V'ruach Elokim merachefes al pnei hamayim, and the spirit of Hashem was hovering over the face of the mayim. So in a way, all this darkness, this tohu and vohu, this choshech, this tahum, this is the darkness that Hashem uses his the Ruach Elokim to mitgaber. We spoke about this in the Sukkah. Mindy was there, to mitgaber over the inherent darkness, this act of rising the creative force over the inherent negativity, or not negativity, I shouldn't use that word, but physicality that could go into darkness, tohu, vavohu, and choshech. So, and then in this beautiful introduction to the Chumash from the Kohos Chumash, it says that we need to heal ourselves before we can heal the world. So if we think about the Jewish people, if we think about the fact that Hashem wanted all of humanity to be receptive to divine light, divine design, divine connection, and he was trying to get everyone to be in on this program, but it was just the Jewish people who sort of really opted for it, Abraham, and then his son Yitzchak, and then Yitzchak's son Yaakov, and then the 12 sons of Yaakov. If they were given this mission and they took on the mission of healing the world, so we know that in spiritual terms, we can't heal anyone or give over anyone to anyone or be anything for anyone until we can do that for ourselves, heal this great divide in a way. So we need to know Hashem is the source of all our blessings. Oh, so this is an answer to this question. If we're going to be asking this question, why did the Chumash start with Bereishit bara Elokim, if it's all about creating divine light, making this connection with Hashem? So maybe we should start the Torah with the mitzvahs, because the mitzvahs establish that connection. So the answer is no, because in order to make this connection, linking heaven and earth, the most important thing that we have to have as a priori midah is gratitude and humility. Gratitude and humility that we don't have anything, we aren't anything, we don't exist, we don't have any independent Metzius, existence outside of Hashem. So when we start reading this whole story of the mission and this whole story of creation with the fact that Hashem creates everything, then we know that he is the source of all our blessings and that everything belongs to him, was sourced in him, starts with him. He's the source of all that is. So it keeps us on the right track. Also, as Rashi says, the world can have many opinions about the land of Israel, who owns it, who should have it. So when we start the Torah with the story of creation, the idea is Hashem created the world. He can give, portions of it to whoever he chooses. And then he establishes his credentials so that later when it's written in the Torah that Hashem promised the land of Israel to Avraham Avinu and his descendants, it's right there in the name of the person who created the world. Now, all of that you probably knew, a lot of that stuff. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't, but it's very possible you heard it all before. But let's carry on. Maybe there'll be some new things as there was for me. So it says that the Torah was written with black fire on white fire, and the world was created for the sake of the Torah and for the sake of humanity. The creation account establishes Hashem as the creator and the true owner of the world, just like I said. The sovereignty allows him to expropriate the Jewish homeland from the people whom he has allowed to settle there in the meantime. Okay. Now, this is the part that I found very interesting. The creation in which we live in is a final stage in the creative process. It was preceded by a number of spiritual realms. Now, whenever I read this before, I think I always imagined that Hashem created different worlds historically, and those worlds were maybe unfit, and then he created our world. But the way that I'm understanding it now, which I think is the way that it always was, but I didn't really understand it to be that way, is that Hashem had to create spiritual worlds, and within those spiritual worlds, more this whole process of Tzimtzum that we've discussed, how Hashem constricted his light, constricted his light, constricted his light. There's spiritual realms that exist that preceded and do precede even in now, in the time of right now, this physical world that we're living in. So while we're living in this physical world, there are other realms that are existing now that create a linkage between our physical world and the heavenly realms that are more less physical in their makeup. So let me actually give you an actual map of all these physical realms. So it's kind of interesting. Among these spiritual realms is the abode of souls, the place where souls come from before they're born. And this is the realms where souls go to after they've lived their life. This realm, abode of souls, is also called the world to come. So it's another dimension of reality that exists on the way to us being here in physical bodies, on a physical landscape, living physical lives. But preceding it was this abode of souls. Now there's another realm. If a soul needs to be cleansed, it enters into purgatory, where a cleansing occurs. Now, purgatory is a scary word. We think about it in very Christian terms. Hell, a person's going to burn, but they're going to be cleansed. We have a cleansing realm. There's a realm, so between us and the world to come, there's a realm called purgatory. It's like the dry cleaning realm. When the world has been raised to the level of divine consciousness, the souls awaiting in the world to come will be restored to their physical bodies. Now how that fits in those realms, we have our realm, and then we have the world to come with purgatory in the middle of those two realms. That's one construct. And then I also learned that the physical universe at the moment of creation constituted and still constitutes 9 concentric spheres. So this is pretty interesting. So we're going to go from the inner sphere, and we're going to go in 9 concentric spheres outwards, outwards, outwards. What are those 9 concentric spheres? So we're going to start with, should we go from the, we'll start with the most physical. We'll go from the most, oh, actually, let's go from the which way should we go? We'll go from the inner to the outer, or the outer to the inner. They were all created at the same time. Anyway, we'll start. I'll start the way I learned it. First of all, we have the celestial vault. Then within that, the realm of stars. Then within that, the realm of the visible planets, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, all having their own sphere. Then the sphere which has the sun in it, then the sphere which has the moon in it, and then the sphere of Earth. And yeah, so I actually read that yeah, okay, so we'll come back. So the outer 8 are called ether. They surround, there's a space in between all those things. So the outer 8, so just the earth, the moon, and the sun, and then all the others, they're in this different realms of ether. Okay, we're getting to the end of this. Maybe I'll pause it in a minute. The earth at the moment of creation was laid in 4 concentric spheres. Solid earth in the middle, then water, then gas, then fire. The solid earth and the water are called earth, haaretz, and then the gas and the fire are called shemayim. Now, I was finding all this very interesting. It might be very technical, but I'll pause it and see if anybody feels like they want fun. So why does all this matter? Fire, you know, I said solid earth and then water and fire, blah, 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 all this. If we imagine that all of this stuff that's been going on, corona, politics, discord, fear, people nervous, sick, what's this all about? And if we imagine that the whole point of all of this is that we have to shift. Where do we have to shift and where do we have to go? We have to shift from functioning in a very physical way, in a very material way, into functioning in a way that's, and I don't know if this terminology will be distasteful to you, but it makes sense to me, in a higher vibrational frequency. We need to start becoming more, we need to shift from one way of being to another way of being. And where are we supposed to shift? We're supposed to shift from a more materialistic way of being to a more light-filled, energetic, compassionate, loving, higher frequency way of being. And that is a process. It's a birth process. Like there's contractions and then there's birth. We are shifting as a human nation, as a human people, living in a very material world. Imagine that we're all on a plane and the plane left at creation and it's flying, and it's heading to Mashiach. And certain stops along the way, or certain things along the way, take that plane, you know, and help that plane move along its journey. So the plane set off at the beginning of creation, and the beginning of creation, this fact that we have fire and gas, that's Shemayim, and water and earth. That's what we call earth. But really, when we learn about Mashiach, we learn that souls are going to come back into bodies that have passed on, and there's going to be resurrection, and there's going to be all this changing of things that in our construct we think of as very set. Person is in a body, they live 120 years, they're done, their soul goes away. Now we're starting, if we want to move into messianic places, we've got to start being less earthly, less just solid earth and water, and more into the more abstracty, more loving, more kind, more consciousness, more outside of our physical realities. And is that connected with fire and gas? Is it? Well, there's a funny thing. Gas or ether, let's say, space. I've told you so many times that the fact that we're having a shir and people are in different places and we're connecting over Zoom, that's less material, more energetic, more abstract, more in the ether, right? I'm communicating with you, but I'm not in the same space as you. We've got to take the elements of our creation and kind of start functioning in a slightly different way. Functioning, once for Purim, I dressed up as a light body. Now, what's a light body? That's like a, what is that? How can you dress up as a light body on Purim? So somehow in my mind, I was trying to access that aspect that on some level, we have to start becoming less identified with our physicality, less identified with the physicality of I eat, I sleep, I have steak, I have to, you know, shop. People are in lockdown. People have to, you know, they got lots of time to daydream, to meditate, to pray, to not run around. So they start developing more in a non-physical way and more in a somewhat spiritual way. So all this stuff about the creation of the world, somehow, when I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking of these different levels of creation and all of these things, it's an interesting, what's interesting to me is it's a continuum. It's a continuum from physically dense material to physically less dense material in a way. And you know, in Tanya it says that we all connected to fire, water, earth, and air. All of us, we made up of the same substances that this whole universe is made up of, as we made up of earth, water, air, and fire. So the actual earth, the creation is made up of that, and the separation of Shemayim and Aretz. But we don't want them to be so separate. We want earth to be aerated with consciousness. The consciousness is the Shemayim part. Like I'll show you this little, I don't know if you'll be able to, no, it's in pencil, you won't be able to see. The earthly part is the earthly, yeah, here you can see. The earthly part is the earth and the water, and the heavenly part is the gas and the fire. But really, we have to realize that what's more dominant in our reality, we always thought we dominated by our muscles, our bones, our houses, our cars, our possessions. And now we're starting to realize that we're really dominated by our consciousness, our relationships. That's ether and fire stuff, our emotions, our feelings, our less physical aspects. I don't know if I'm making sense. Maybe everything I'm saying is a little bizarre, but I will pause for comments for us. And I would love to hear comments, commentaries.